Close to 26 years after South Africa's transition from apartheid to democracy, our country finds itself at a crossroads again. Some say this is the time when we have to return to what Nelson Mandela called the RDP of the soul. This is a concept the former statesman introduced during his presidency to help South Africans find a moral compass and to heal from the decades of hate, oppression and dispossession. To help us talk more on this, we're joined by the chairperson of the Kara Heritage Institute, Dr. Mathole Motshekga. Good evening, and thank you so much for your time tonight. Where do we even begin at a time like this to find our moral compass?
Listeners, I think we should say that the recent social unrest, together with the two pandemics of COVID-19 and gender-based violence, revealed that South African society, especially the African majority, have lost fundamental ethical and human values which reside in the human soul. These are the values of self-knowledge, self-worth and self-esteem, self-respect and respect for others and their property, culture of self-help and self-reliance, culture of learning and teaching, the will for development and progress. The father of our nation, Nelson Mandela, realized and acknowledged that colonialism and apartheid eroded the African soul and the ethical and moral values inherent in it. Mandela believed that our society is sick because of the erosion of its soul. To address this social sickness, Mandela called for the Reconstruction and Development Program, RDP of the soul, as a prerequisite for social and economic reconstruction and development. In 1995, Mandela established an interfaith platform for the revival and restoration of the African soul and its inherent values. This platform was named the Commission for Religious Affairs, CRA. This commission was charged with the responsibility to facilitate the interaction between religious and political organization. I have just heard the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal saying something very important, that we need a healing. We need social and nation building. That is very pointed, and if we take that position of the Premier forward, we will be able to address the current challenges facing us. The Commission for Religious Affairs, established by Nelson Mandela in 1995, is still alive. On Tuesday, it held a meeting which brought together all faith groups, Christians, Muslims, African religion, Hindus, Buddhists, and so on. And it agreed that we should not have a top-down approach in addressing this problem, but we should go back to the basics, starting with the creation of a national interfaith forum for dialogue and collaboration. And that forum actually should work with the Presidential Interfaith Working Group. And that Presidential Interfaith Working Group should be cascaded down. We should have premiers interfaith working groups, mayoral interfaith working groups, local mayors interfaith working groups, so that in these forums, all religious groups must not work in silos where you find the Christians doing their own thing, and amongst the Christians there are different denominations, the Muslims doing their own thing, and amongst the Muslims there are Sunnis, there are others, and African religion doing its own things. So all of them, in terms of what Mandela calls for, must work together. And Mandela said that these institutions can bring about social cohesion and nation building, provided they realize that the transformation of our country, I quote, the transformation of our country requires the greatest possible cooperation between religious and political bodies, critically and wisely serving our people together. Neither political or religious objectives can be achieved in isolation. They are held in a creative tension with common commitments. We are partners in building our society. In other words, President Mandela said, civil society organizations and political organizations should work together in a partnership to address the challenges which arise from the legacy of apartheid. But even more important, he had identified the philosophy of Ubuntu, African humanism, to be the core value that should bring us, all of us together, both black and white.
And
so I think,
if I can,
yes.
please, if I can come in there, pardon me, I'd like to borrow from what the former President Thabo Mbeki said during a Nelson Mandela lecture. He said the RDP was eminently about changing the material conditions of the lives of our people. It made no reference to matters of the soul except indirectly. For instance, the RDP document said the RDP integrates economic growth, development, reconstruction, and redistribution into a unified program. And he then continues to talk about how this, the key to this link is an infrastructural program that will provide access to modern and effective services like electricity, water, telecommunications, transport, health, education, etc. Now, some of what has been blamed on the unrest that we have seen, especially in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal, is that a lot of those that may have spoken to some of the journalists on the ground are really crying about access to services, basic services, such as these ones that the former President Thabo Mbeki is talking about, especially when it comes to this issue of the RDP, that it's not only about cohesiveness or social cohesion, but it is also about the delivery of services.
President Mbeki is right. But as I said, we must go to the basics. The basics were outlined by Anton Mzwakele Mbede, the founder of the ANC Women's Youth League, who said that African people, like Oriental people, are deeply spiritual and religious people. It is that African spirituality which has to do with the soul that made Africans, enable them to build empires without the use of the police and the army. Now, what has gone wrong is what Nelson Mandela has identified, that our soul, we lost our soul, and as a result, when we have problems, we want to solve our problems by the use of force, theft, and we rape, we kill. Those things have nothing to do with lack of service delivery. They have to do with the erosion of our soul. So it is true that people want access to resources, material things, but unless we get the soul right, even if you can give them right now, government gives social grants, children's grants, free electricity, water, but still we behave like we are animals because there's something wrong with our soul. And therefore, I want to maintain that we need to work together, religious bodies, traditional leaders, traditional healers, to rebuild the soul of the African and restore the values, and then that will take us halfway to addressing the challenges that we face now. Lastly, another problem is the violent dispossession of the land of African people and its natural resources, and creating native reserves and squatter camps, labor camps, like our townships, our informal settlements, are part of the things that further erodes the soul of African people. And therefore, you can't blame them for what we have now. But we have a responsibility to transform this society, and we can do so if we can also transform religious and traditional institutions into developmental institutions so that our people don't have to depend on others for survival. Right. They should be able to produce their own medicines. They should be able to produce their own food, their own clothes, their own leatherwork, and so on. So it's not a question of giving access, material access to people. It is a question of reconstruction and development of the soul, and then make people self-independent, self-reliant, develop their will for development and progress. Right. And also we need a holistic approach to the solution of these problems.
All right. Dr. Motshekga, thank you so much for your time tonight. We certainly do appreciate your perspective and really look forward then to see what becomes the next step in order to ensure that what you're talking about, especially the relationship then between different religious bodies and how that translates to a better society on the ground. And that was Kara, the chairperson of the Kara Heritage Institute, Dr. Mathole Motshekga.